Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we'll be talking about the AFC West teams, what I think their records will be like in 2025, and my schedule predictions. This on another episode of... So, to start out in week 1, the LA Chargers get to play the Kansas City Chiefs in Brazil. And I think they'll lose this game. I think the Chiefs will be much improved from their 2024 season where their own offense, they weren't as effective. That being said, I think there might be a little bit of an issue there depending on how long a potential Rashee Rice suspension takes place for. But I do think the Chiefs will get the better of the Chargers in week 1. In week 2, the Chargers get to now travel to play the Las Vegas Raiders, and I'll give the Raiders the win. I think the Raiders do have a few nice pieces on that team, and I think they'll be able to beat the Chargers at home. In week 3, now the Chargers get to host the Denver Broncos. And on their third division game of the year in week 3, I think they beat the Broncos at home. In week 4, the Chargers now get to travel to play the New York Giants, and I think they win on the road in New York. In week 5, the Chargers now host the Washington Commanders, and this will be a tough game. The Commanders, with Jaden Daniels, I think are going to be a very good NFC team. This one's kind of hard to pick, but I think the Chargers at home get the win. Right now, there's a little uncertainty with Terry McLaurin, what's going on with him. I don't think Deebo Samuel is good enough anymore to be a number 1 receiver if something goes wrong with the McLaurin situation. So, hedging my bets on thinking that the Chargers will win this game. In week 6, the Chargers now get to travel to play the Miami Dolphins, and I think they win this version, and I think they win this iteration of the Herbert-Tua matchup. So in week 7, the Chargers get to host the Indianapolis Colts, and with the Colts, whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, who's going to start, I'm not entirely sure, but what I am pretty sure of is that Justin Herbert is better than either of them, and that'll make the difference, having the better quarterback in this one, because the Colts, with that uncertainty at quarterback, it's hard to see them winning games like this. In week 8, the Chargers get to host the Minnesota Vikings, and honestly, I see the Vikings winning this game. Their roster is very talented. They have a great receiving duo in Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. Still got Aaron Jones at running back. So I think that the Vikings will pull out the win here. In week 9, the Chargers get to travel to play the Tennessee Titans, and the Chargers will get the win. The Titans just aren't going to be even a middling AFC team this year. It's just not. The roster isn't there. They may have their quarterback, they may have found the right guy, but until they build around him, this team is going to struggle. In week 10, the Chargers get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, I think the Steelers actually win this game. In week 11, the Chargers now travel to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the Jaguars win this game. In week 12, the Chargers get their bye. So, in week 13, coming off their bye, they get to host the Raiders, and I think they'll win this game. Even though I did give the Raiders the win the first time these two teams matched up, I do think the Chargers are the better team and will get a win here in week 13. In week 14, the Chargers get to host the Philadelphia Eagles, and at home, I think the Chargers will actually win. In week 15, the Chargers get to travel to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And in week 15, I think the Chargers actually win on the road in Kansas City. In week 16, the Chargers now get to travel to play the Dallas Cowboys. And unfortunately for the Chargers, I see the Cowboys winning this game. In week 17, the Chargers get to host the Houston Texans. And I think they win that game, beating the Houston Texans. And to finish out their season, the Chargers get to travel to play the Denver Broncos. And I think they split the series with the Broncos and lose to Denver to finish out the season, which means that the Chargers end their year with a 10-7 record. Next up in the AFC West, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. And in week 1, they get to play the New England Patriots, which unfortunately they will lose that game. The reason I think that is because, well, that roster, especially that defense, it's nothing to be desired. Especially considering they just released Christian Wilkins, which that's a topic for another video, but the fact that they don't even have him around anymore, regardless of how good he'll be, it's not looking good for that defense. So I think even a team like the Patriots has a very good shot at winning this game. In week 2, the Raiders get to host the LA Chargers, and I think they win this game. In week 3, the Raiders now get to travel to play the Washington Commanders, and they're going to lose. Washington will be better on offense than the Raiders. There's no debate there. And it's honestly, I could see Washington being better on defense. Yes, the Raiders will have the single best defensive player in Max Crosby, but after him, their defense doesn't really have anything I think the Commanders would be scared of. In week 4, the Raiders now get to host the Chicago Bears, and I think they'll lose this game. The Bears very much improved. I think they'll be able to beat up on the Raiders on both sides of the ball. In week 5, the Raiders get to travel to play the Indianapolis Colts, and I think the Raiders will win this game. The Colts have that unfortunate QB situation where they have Richardson and Daniel Jones. I think Geno Smith is better than either of them. In week 6, the Raiders now get to host the Tennessee Titans, and they win. I think they win because mainly the fact that that Raiders team is now, in this week, is actually matched up against a team they might be more talented than, which is, on offense, not hard, but defense, very much so. The Raiders, in week 7, get to travel to play the Chiefs, and I think the Chiefs win. I don't think I really need to explain why I think the Chiefs win. It's probably just going to happen. In week 8, the Raiders get their bye. In week 9, the Raiders coming off their bye get to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are also coming off their bye. And I think the Jaguars win this game, despite the fact that the Jaguars have less talent on that team than in years past. I think they have just enough where they can out-duel the Raiders. In week 10, the Raiders now get to travel to play the Denver Broncos. And I think the Broncos win at home. It's not that hard to see why the Broncos would be able to beat up on the Raiders. They're better on defense, especially considering their defense was the best in 2024. And on offense, they don't need to be the best, but I think they're very comparable to the Raiders in that regard. In week 11, the Raiders get to host the Dallas Cowboys. I think Dallas bounces back after a pretty tragic 2024 season, and the Raiders are one of their unfortunate victims in 2025. In week 12, the Raiders get to host the Cleveland Browns, and I think they win this game. The Browns, well, first off, don't know who their quarterback's going to be, and that might change somewhat frequently during the year depending on how the year progresses. And their offense I don't really see as that stellar of a unit. In week 13, the Raiders now get to travel to play the Chargers, and I think they'll lose this game. In week 14, the Raiders get to host the Denver Broncos, and I think they'll split the series and win, in spite of the fact that they are not the better team. In week 15, the Raiders get to travel to play the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're going to lose. In week 16, the Raiders get to travel to play the Houston Texans this time, and they're still going to lose. In week 17, the Raiders now get to host the New York Giants, and in spite of the fact that the Giants will have a much worse record than the Raiders come the end of the season, I think they win here. They're a better team with a harder schedule. In week 18, the Raiders now get to host the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think in week 18, they're going to lose. So that means the Raiders end their season with a record of 5-12. Next up in the AFC West, we have the Denver Broncos. In week 1, they played the Tennessee Titans, and I think they're going to win. In week 2, the Broncos get to travel to play the Colts, and in the battle of the two horse teams, the Denver Broncos come out on top. In week 3, the Broncos now get to travel to play the Chargers. And at home, I think the Chargers win. In week 4, Broncos get to host the Cincinnati Bengals. And unfortunately, even though the Broncos will have a much better defense than Cincinnati, that offense of Cincinnati, I think, will tell the tale here. In week 5, the Broncos now get to travel to play the Philadelphia Eagles. And while I think the Broncos defense will give the Eagles a little bit of trouble, I don't think the Broncos offense can keep up. In week 6, the Broncos now get to travel to play the New York Jets. And in London, I think the Jets get the win. In week 7, the Broncos get to host the New York Giants, and I think the Broncos get the win here. Unfortunately, the Giants have one of the hardest schedules in this upcoming NFL season, and I think the Broncos will be able to beat up on a team that's, by this point in the season, already going through some of the hardest stretches of their schedule. In week 8, the Broncos get to host the Dallas Cowboys, and I think Dallas wins this game. In week 9, the Broncos get to travel to play the Houston Texans, and I think the Broncos will beat the Texans. In week 10, the Broncos get to host the Raiders. I think they win in no small part because of their defense. And in week 11, I'm picking an upset. I'm saying that the Broncos will actually beat the Chiefs at home. In week 12, the Broncos have their bye. And in week 13, coming off their bye, the Broncos face off against the Washington Commanders. And I think they win this game. The Broncos' offense, as long as it works better than it did last year, should be able to put up enough points where their defense can win them this game against Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. In week 14, the Broncos get to travel to play the Raiders, and I think they'll split the series and lose here. In week 15, the Broncos get to host the Green Bay Packers, and I think they win. I think that defense is that scary, and I think the Packers, unfortunately, are a team that the Broncos defense can take advantage of. In week 16, the Broncos get to host the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the Broncos will actually win this game. In week 17, the Broncos get to travel to play the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think they split the series with the Chiefs, and they lose here. And to finish out their season, the Broncos get to host the LA Chargers, and I think, once again, they split the series, and the Broncos win in Week 18, which will give them a record of 10-7. And to finish out the AFC West, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who in Week 1 get to beat the Chargers in Brazil. In Week 2, the Chiefs get to host the Philadelphia Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch, and they're going to lose again. In Week 3, the Chiefs now get to beat up on the poor Giants because the Giants, unfortunately, are going to be playing a lot of really tough teams early in the season, and the Chiefs are one of them. In Week 4, the Chiefs get to host the Baltimore Ravens, which is going to be a great matchup to watch, but I think the Chiefs pull out the win against the Ravens here. In Week 5, the Chiefs now get to travel to play the Jaguars, and I think the Chiefs are more talented than the Jaguars, so they're going to win pretty easily. In Week 6, the Chiefs get to host the Detroit Lions, and I think the Lions will actually beat the Chiefs. In Week 7, the Chiefs now get to host the Las Vegas Raiders, and I don't think I need to explain why a team like the Raiders isn't going to beat up on the Chiefs. In Week 8, the Chiefs get to host the Washington Commanders, which that's going to be a great matchup to watch. I think Jaden Daniels and the Commanders should put on a nice show against Mahomes, but I don't think they're going to win. I think the Chiefs win in Week 8. In Week 9, now the Chiefs get to travel to play the Bills in their yearly matchup of Allen versus Mahomes in the regular season. And, like in years past, Josh Allen wins this matchup. In Week 10, the Chiefs get their bye week. In Week 11, the Chiefs get to face the Denver Broncos coming off their bye week, and I think they lose. In Week 12, the Chiefs get to host the Colts, and I don't think there's any version of the current Colts roster that can beat the Chiefs. So, I think the Chiefs win. In Week 13, the Chiefs get to travel to play the Dallas Cowboys, and unfortunately for America's team, they will lose this game. In Week 14, the Chiefs get to host the Houston Texans. And I think CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans do just enough to win a close game against Mahomes. In Week 15, the Chiefs get to host the Chargers, and I think the Chargers split the series with the Chiefs and win here on the road. In Week 16, the Chiefs get to go on the road and play the Tennessee Titans, and the Titans, unfortunately, do not match up well with the Chiefs, and I think the Chiefs just roll over the Titans. In Week 17, the Chiefs get to host the Denver Broncos, who they will beat to split that series. And in Week 18, the Chiefs will sweep the Raiders, which will make them end their season with a record of 11-6. So with that being said, guys, please like, share, subscribe down below. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time.